Oh my goodness, the Oompa Loompas sound very strange to me. Let's find out a bit more. Chapter 17. Augustus Gloop goes up the pipe. When Mr. Wonka turned round and saw what Augustus Gloop was doing, he cried out, "Oh no, please, Augustus, please, I beg of you, do not do that. My chocolate mustn't be untouched by human hands." "Augustus," called out Mrs. Gloop, "didn't you hear what the man said? Come away from the river at once." "This is fabulous stuff," said Augustus, taking not the slightest notice of his mother or Mr. Wonka. "Gosh, I need a bucket to drink it properly." "Augustus," cried Mr. Wonka, hopping up and down and waggling his stick, "you must come away. You are dirtying my chocolate." "Augustus," cried Mrs. Gloop, "Augustus." But Augustus was deaf to everything except the call of his enormous stomach. He was now lying full length on the ground with his head far out over the river, lapping up the chocolate like a dog. "Augustus," shouted Mrs. Gloop, "you'll be giving the nasty cold of yours to about 1,000,000 people all over the country." "Be careful, Augustus," shouted Mr. Gloop. "You're leading far too far." Mr. Gloop was exactly right, for suddenly there was a shriek, and then a splash, and into the river went Augustus Gloop. In 1 second he had disappeared under the brown surface. "Save him!" screamed Mrs. Gloop, going white in the face and waving her umbrella about. "He'll drown! He can't swim! Save him! Save him!" "Oh, goodness heavens, woman," said Mr. Gloop. "I am not diving in there. I've got my best suit on." Augustus Gloop's face came up again to the surface, painted brown with chocolate. "Help! Help! Fish me out!" "Don't just stand there," Mrs. Gloop screamed. "Do something." "I am doing something," said Mr. Gloop, who was now taking off his jacket and getting ready to dive in. But while he was doing this, the wretched boy was being sucked closer and closer towards the mouth of one of the great pipes that was dangling down into the river. Then all at once, the powerful suction took hold of him completely, and he was pulled under the surface and then into the mouth of the pipe. The crowd on the riverbank waited breathlessly to see where he would come out. "There he goes!" somebody shouted, pointing upwards. And sure enough, because the pipe was made of glass, Augustus Gloop could be clearly seen shooting up inside it, head first like a torpedo. "Help! Murder! Police!" screamed Mrs. Gloop. "Augustus, come back at once! Where are you going?" "It's a wonder to me," said Mr. Gloop, "how that pipe is big enough for him to get through." "It isn't big enough," said Charlie. "Oh dear, look, he's slowing down." "So he is," said Grandpa Joe. "He's going to stick," said Charlie. "I think he is," said Grandpa Joe. "By golly, he's got stuck," said Charlie. "It's the stomach that's done it," said Mr. Gloop. "He's blocked the whole pipe," said Grandpa Joe. "Smash the pipe!" yelled Mrs. Gloop, waving her umbrella. "Augustus, come out at once!" The watchers below could see the chocolate swishing around the boy in the pipe, and they could see it building up behind him in a solid mass, pushing against the blockage. The pressure was terrific. Something had to give. Something did give, and that something was Augustus. Woof! Up he shot again like a bullet out of the barrel of a gun. "It's disappeared!" yelled Mrs. Gloop. "Where does that pipe go? Quick, call the fire brigade!" "Keep calm," cried Mr. Wonka. "Keep calm, my dear lady. There is no danger. No danger whatsoever. Augustus has gone into a little journey, that's all. A most interesting little journey. But he'll come out fine, you'll see." "How can he possibly come out fine?" snapped Mrs. Gloop. "He'll be made into marshmallows in a second." "Impossible!" cried Mr. Wonka. "Unthinkable! Inconceivable! How absurd! He would never be made into marshmallows." "And why, may I ask, not?" shouted Mrs. Gloop. "Because the pipe doesn't go anywhere near it. That pipe, the one that Augustus has gone up, happens to lead directly to the room where I make the most delicious kind of strawberry-flavoured chocolate-coated fudge." "Then he's going to be made into strawberry-flavoured chocolate-coated fudge!" screamed Mrs. Gloop. "My poor Augustus! They'll be selling him by the pound all over the the country by tomorrow morning." "Quite right," said Mr. Gloop. "I know I'm right," said Mrs. Gloop. "It's beyond a joke," said Mr. Gloop. "Mr. Wonka doesn't seem to think so," cried Mrs. Gloop. "Just look at him. He's laughing his head off. How dare you laugh like that when my boy has gone up your pipe? You're a monster," she shrieked, pointing her umbrella at Mr. Wonka as though he was going to run through it. "You think it's a joke, do you? You think that sucking my boy up in your fudge room like that is one big colossal joke?" "He'll be perfectly safe," said Mr. Wonka, giggling. "He'll be chocolate fudge," shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Never," cried Mr. Wonka. "Of course he will," shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "I wouldn't allow it," cried Mr. Wonka. "And why not?" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Because that would taste terrible," said Mr. Wonka. "Just imagine it, Augustus flavoured chocolate-coated Gloop. No one would ever buy it." "They most certainly would," said Mr. Gloop. "I don't even want to think about it," shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Nor do I," said Mr. Wonka. "And I do promise you, madame, that your darling boy is perfectly safe." "If he's perfectly safe, then where is he?" snapped Mr. Gloop. "Lead me to him this instant." Mr. Wonka turned round and clicked his fingers. Immediately, Oompa Loompas appeared, as if from nowhere, and stood beside them. The Oompa Loompa bowed and smiled, showing his beautiful white teeth. His skin was rosy white, his long hair was golden brown, and the top of his head came just above the height of Mr. Wonka's knee. He wore a deerskin sling over his shoulder. "Now listen to me," said Mr. Wonka, looking down at the tiny man. "I want you to take Mr. and Mrs. Gloop to the fudge room and help them to find their son Augustus. He's gone up the pipe." The Oompa Loompas took one look at Mrs. Gloop and exploded into laughter. "Oh, do be quiet," said Mr. Wonka. "Control yourself. Pull yourself together. Mrs. Gloop doesn't think this is at all funny." "You can say that again," said Mrs. Gloop. "Go straight to the fudge room," Mr. Wonka said. "And when you get there, take a long stick and start poking around inside the big chocolate mixing barrel. I'm almost certain you'll find him there. But you better look sharp. You'll have to hurry. If you leave him in the chocolate mixing barrel too long, he's going to get poured into the fudge boiler, and that really would be a disaster. My fudge would be quite unedible." Mrs. Gloop let out a shriek of fury. "Oh!" "I'm joking," said Mr. Wonka. "I didn't mean it. Forgive me. I am so sorry. Goodbye, Mrs. Gloop. And Mr. Gloop. Goodbye. See you later."